everyone. Thank you so much for making the time and coming out this evening for our panel discussion and dialogue. I'm going to keep my remarks super short. First, I just want to thank everyone on the panel for making the time to do this, and for our wonderful moderator who's going to lead us in this dialogue. I think it's just so important, and I'm very excited that we could bring everyone together and do this. There's a few seats in the front if people want to come in. If you all are interested, please sign up for our email list. We have several other events coming up. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the other Nicole, who will kick us off.
It's the Nicole show, y'all. Thank you for spending your evening with us today. We are so delighted to have you here today. And most importantly, we are here to celebrate this beautiful art. And in speaking with Nicole about this evening and what would make her smile at the end of the night, she really said that she wanted this to be authentic and really guided by the insight from you all and what you would like to learn from the panelists and what fills your cup at the end of the night. And so when you think about when you walked in to this beautiful gallery and you got to see some of the pieces of art up on the wall, think about some of the emotions that jumped into your mind, and hold those emotions true through this discussion. There may be some times where there's some things that you may learn this evening that disrupt your spirit a bit. Lean into that. We are here to celebrate goodness, but to also challenge ourselves and to learn something and think about what our work is, and if we are in on cultivating ourselves through some action after this. So we are going to start off by honoring Halim with some spoken words. So if you would start us off.
I don't think I need a microphone. My voice, when I perform, it tends to project. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This piece, I won't hold you long. It's a piece that I had the opportunity to write after returning back from 22 years of incarceration. Probably wrote thousands of poems when I was incarcerated, but this piece right here was written directly after my release. I had the opportunity to watch a film series called When They See Us, and it was about the Central Park five children in New York City, falsely accused of a crime that they didn't commit, like myself. Some of them went through some very horrific experiences with the criminal legal system, for which they were, just treated like animals. And for me, I am a product of a generation of children who were labeled super predators. So when you look at a lot of the art, the super predators at Spindle Top Hill and the super predators at the Museum of Fine Art Houston, this is me taking a terminology that was thrust upon not just myself, but a generation of children who look like me due to my skin complexion. And we were considered to be godless, fatherless, and jobless. And instead of providing us with God, instead of providing us with fathers or jobs or entrepreneurship opportunities, the only remedy that was given to us was prison. So me seeing this film about these 5 children after doing 22 years of incarceration, it impacted me viscerally, and I wrote this piece, and it's titled When They See Us. I'm not going to write poems about people judging people. I'm going to write poems and speak about people loving people, See, the problem is much bigger than just class and race. It's not a political war, but a spiritual battle between love and hate. If it's going to take a village, then our villages are going to need love. So when they see us, they don't see us as killers and thugs. So when they see us and don't judge. So when they see us with eyes full of love. See, it's not about conservatives and liberals reaching across the aisle. It's about reaching into our hearts to extend a loving smile. See, these labels are fables that separate us from our truth. We all need to weed the weeds to see the love in our roots. Love is the revolution, and compassion is our bullets. Empathy is the trigger for forgiveness to pull it. Freedom is our target, and unconditional love be our goal. With civic engagement started in the seat of our soul. Grace plays the symphony as just mercy leads the band for the Lady of Liberty to love and accept all in this land. Love is the revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Halim. Tell us more about yourself. You're more than an activist, than an artist. What would you like this group of distinguished professionals, individuals, people to know about you?
Can everyone hear me? I think I'm alien. I don't think I'm from Earth. I don't meet too many men who talk about love as much as I do. I think people think that I've changed. I think people ask me, like, when did you change, as if I was really once a monster or a menace. I'm still the same person. I just didn't have the comfortability to be who I am today. I didn't have the environment. I didn't have the role models. And contrary to what people think, when they were locking up our entire generation of young men that was labeling us as super predators, it was some very beautiful human beings that were inside of prison who, had they not poured into me through their mentorship, the curriculum that they created, which I am proudly an alma mater of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Some of the most intelligent, some of the most disciplined and loving men that I've ever met in my life. So who I am today, if I could tell you just a little bit about myself, I'm just a human being who has an extraterrestrial experience of being committed to unconditional love. And I don't see it from a perspective of passivity. I don't think anyone who knows me or has an opportunity to gaze upon my countenance to see that I'm an advocate of pure pacifism. I believe that love is assertive, it's dynamic, it's needed, and I stand in the interest of love, and anything that I do in the interest of creativity is in the service of love.
Same question for Brandon, if you'll just pass the mic. Tell us, Brandon Zech, publisher at Glasstire, tell us, what would you like this group of individuals to know about you?
I really care and believe in the power that art can have on a person. I think there's something that happens whenever a person is standing in front of an artwork, and whether that artwork is abstract, whether that artwork has a ton of meaning in it, whether that artwork's role in the world is just to look nice and bring you some comfort. I think looking at art, my job is to look at art and to write about art and to run a publication that covers art. And I think 8 years of doing that have only deepened my belief in the power, the transformative power of art on people, and the transformative power that art has to connect people, to communicate messages, and also to just really make people feel things that they wouldn't have expected.
Thank you, Nicole. And before I answer that question, I just want to thank God for this opportunity to be here tonight. I want to thank God, the other Nicole, for the invitation. And Nori, Angel, our president, who is working every day to make a difference. I thank her for referring me. And a special thank you to all my friends who are here tonight, and my wonderful daughter, who is our communication director, Sade Campbell. Now, as far as what I would like for you all to know about me, I am an appreciative person, as I have just demonstrated to you. I appreciate people's help, and I do my best to go to advocate and to help others. That is what I would like for you all to know about me. I'm a fighter. Thank you.
Thank you, and you're also the founder and executive director of the Campbell Foundation.
Yes, I will take to that one later.
Yes, absolutely.
But thank you.
So how does the Chief Impact Officer at the Houston Food Bank moderate a panel of people who are steeped in art culture or do art? And why me? And what I would like you to know about me is I have the pleasure of serving the institution of the Houston Food Bank in that title, but I have an intimate experience with my brother, who was also a formerly incarcerated individual. I grew up in a middle-class family. My mother and father graduated from college. My brother was also wrongly accused, and my family spent and remortgaged their home for about 10 years of their lives to get him out and his records expunged. I have a direct experience with, and the privilege, actually, of having access, and I don't take that for granted one day. And my brother has 2 beautiful young children that I'm able to visit in a few weeks. And I also work in food insecurity, which stands at the intersection of incarceration. And you may say, how? What in the heck does food insecurity have to do? It has so much to do with it. And that's because food insecurity has nothing to do about lack of food access. It has everything to do with economic mobility. And economic mobility in our country at sometimes is privileged, and at sometimes, as Halim so eloquently laid out for us in his spoken word, is because we lack humanity. And some systems and structures have been set up to block people and or to perpetuate cycles to keep people inside of. And yet, there is so much hope and opportunity in all of that. And I think when we sit and look around the room, and when we hear about the work of the Honey Brown Hope Foundation, when we hear Brandon talk about what emotion art provides us, there's also so much hope. And so we're going to talk about what art can do to provide avenues to educate, to provide access, to provide hope, to provide a short moment of joy when looking at something. And then what is our role? To unwind some of these systems and practices as we learn today. And so we would like this to be collaborative. I am not here to talk a lot. I am here to just ask questions and to ask more questions and to ask a few more questions and for you all to have direct dialogue, to ask questions yourself. And so eventually I will get up and walk around like Oprah, which I've always wanted to do. But let me give the honor to the panel and ask them to tell a little more about why they were asked to be here today. And so, Halim, you talked about the generation that you grew up in. Can you tell us how art was introduced into your life and clearly what it has afforded you?
My first artistic experience was through music. So my grandfather, who's still alive today, is a jazz player, saxophone player. But I was born in 1980, so I always like to say like my siblings were crack, cocaine, and hip hop. And so I had no infatuation with Dizzy Gillespie, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk. All I wanted to hear was LL Cool J, Kool Moe Dee, and the others, Big Daddy Kane. So I grew up with like hip hop, rap music, and my first intimate expression of art was through hip hop and rap, and being a freestyle rapper, and going to prison when I was 16, writing rap songs and getting into poetry, and then listening to Jay-Z rap about Basquiat. And not knowing who Basquiat was, but being in prison and not having access to like the internet and smartphones and social media. So I'm thinking like maybe Jay-Z made probably some champagne or some sneakers or something. But I used to read the Wall Street Journal every day, and the Wall Street Journal they ran an article on John Michel Basquiat, and it blew me away because he was black and he was a heroin addict and his hair was nappy. He died when he was 27, and he was a street artist and a poet, and it didn't have any images of his work, but just for me to see that he was a human being who in America would be socially constructed as black, and he looked like me, and he was born the same year that my mother was born. I said, you know what, I'm gonna start reading these other articles about these other visual artists who Jay-Z is rapping about. Picasso and Rembrandt and Rothko and Koons and de Kooning and Pollock. So that was my introduction to the visual art. And then once I was released from prison in 2019, I had the opportunity. I was released March 2019, and then we went into quarantine in March 2020. So I had an opportunity for a year to travel the world to speak and see museums and galleries. But I didn't really see any work that impacted me. It wasn't that the work wasn't aesthetically pleasing, it just didn't have an intellectual and a conceptual aesthetic that was that resonated viscerally with my lived experience in my community. So once we went into quarantine lockdown in March 2020, that's when I started painting.
And so community, that word, it just resonates again and again in what you're conveying to us. What is your community? What do you consider your community? And then I'm going to come to Tammie, to talk about the work that Honey Brought Hope does.
As a former jailhouse lawyer, I was given 2 life sentences when I was 16, and supposedly I had one of the most high-powered lawyers in the city, and she sold me out. Her name is Michelle Robbins. She's now the executive director of the NBA Players Union, and I had the opportunity to introduce her, surprise her at an event when I was released, and she admitted to the crowd that she sold me out. And so I say all that to say is that after having an experience like that, I realized that everything was on me. So I had to learn the law to defend myself. And learning criminal and civil law, you have to study Latin. So studying Latin and taking the practice of Malcolm X, studying the dictionary from A to Z, more importantly, the Black's Law Dictionary, I have a very intimate connection with the etymology of words. So when you ask me what is community, the root word community means commune, to connect. So for me, community, I'm not incarcerated by these social constructions of race, of gender, of class, of creed, and sexuality, and disability, and age. Like, my community are human beings who I connect with on the energy level, meaning those who I align with my core values, right? If our core values are in alignment, because I live a purpose-driven life that's fueled by my core values. So my community is anyone, irregardless of any of these social constructions that man has manufactured to create hierarchy and divisiveness between people due to complexion or economic, social, political status. To me, the only thing that matters is core values and alignment with core values and energy and vibration like that.
Oh, there's so much there.
Wow, that is deep.
Yes, and I'm going to stay focused, my friend. So, Ms. Tammie, tell us a little about the Honey Brown Hope Foundation. Then I want to ask you about the role that art plays to serve as a catalyst for transformational dialogue, as we've heard so much about that from Halim.
Yes, we have. Thank you. Well, at the Honey Brown Hope Foundation, we work from the schoolhouse to the jailhouse to advocate for justice, for criminal policy, criminal justice policy reform, to address the school-to-prison pipeline, and to make sure that our children appreciate the value of the written word. When we initially organized the Honey Brown Hope Foundation, it was under the motto, without writing, there would be no reading. Because what we recognized was that history books didn't tell our story. And with history books, we have to realize that it tells his story. That's why it's so important for us to have writers to write our story, to share our story, to have a diverse story included in our history books. And if we can't get it in our history books, we can continue to promote it as a people to make sure our story is being told. Now, at the Honey Brown Hope Foundation, we have expanded upon the written word in terms of an art form, because there are many ways to express one's ideas and thoughts. That includes our photo contest for calendars, where it is an environmental program where young people go out and they take pictures of things that they interpret as their environment, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. Then we have a History Talks program where we promote history in terms of those who have contributed to African Americans, who have contributed to our society, which promotes mutual respect. When we know more about each other, then we can appreciate each other. So with all of those things, we get back to the school-to-prison pipeline, which is taking our children, not only our children's lives, but those who are wrongly incarcerated. And the majority of them look like me. And in addressing that brought me to where we are today. And I don't want to lose focus. I understand what you're saying. I don't want to lose focus why I'm here tonight. I'm not really here to promote Honey Brown Hope Foundation. I'm here to bring about awareness to a man who has been incarcerated for over 40 years, wrongly incarcerated with no evidence. DNA exclusion, and informant that has recanted his statement. And the court system is still holding him hostage.
And I think you're talking about Darius Elam, right?
Darius Elam.
Elam, excuse me. Mhm.
Yes, I most certainly am.
And I definitely have a follow-up question on that. When you talk about the meaningful impact of the children taking pictures, say more about that. What is the impact on those children when they're able to come back and showcase the pictures and tell the story? Because I want Brandon to jump in about the role that media can play also in uplifting the work of artists, whether they be the youngins or an established artist like Halim.
It gives young people an opportunity to express their thoughts, their feelings, to document what Earth looks like as they are experiencing it. And with those photos, they tell a story. They tell a story about what is needed. When you see the beautiful trees, then you see the desert areas in Black communities where participants weren't able to take the beautiful photos of trees and ponds and all of that because they didn't have that. So it's telling the story of what the difference in terms of who is according to your zip code of where you live and what you are experiencing every day. You see the struggles. You see that what some have and some don't. And that should inspire people to move in a direction to make sure that young people get the support they need. When I look at Halim's exhibit, I think to myself, what if the government would invest more in youth than in prisons? What kind of society we would have, how it would be a better nation for us all.
So if you'll pass the mic to Brandon. Brandon, what is the role for media in this discussion?
That's a really big question. I think one of the interesting things about media or art criticism or what art writing, whatever word you want to label it as, is that a lot of it doesn't exist anymore. And what I mean by that is a lot of papers or periodicals or weeklies that used to write about art and write about all of the issues that artists tackle. Places like the Houston Press, places like Free Press Houston, places like the Houston Chronicle. They don't do that anymore, or they do it a lot less. And part of it is the new age of online journalism and being able to tell what people read, being able to tell that if you write this kind of outrageous political story, you'll get a bunch of clicks, versus if you write a story about this artist who's doing really great things in their community, or this review of this exhibition that was wonderful, it's just not as, let's use the term viral, as a lot of other news is. So then when outlets operate on ad revenue and operate on clicks, they focus on the things that get the most clicks. And I think that's been really detrimental in a lot of ways, because it's the issue of, if artists are making work, if artists are putting their thoughts and opinions and feelings into the world, but there's nothing to promote that, or there's nothing to look at it critically or to ask questions about it, there's no way for people to know that it's happening. There's no dialogue that happens on it. And one of the inherent beliefs that we have at Glasstire is that an art community, but a community in general, can only grow, thrive, reflect, and become better if there is dialogue happening. And that dialogue happens through writing, through criticism. So in addition to just what you might think of as an art critic writing a review, whether a painting is painted well or not, art criticism really gets to the heart of the issues that the artist is addressing. So it's just another outlet of the dialogue that an artist is trying to get across. It's a chance to figure out not only what the artist is trying to say, but to determine if the artist could possibly say it better in the future, to determine if there's a way that the artist maybe, if they could improve just that little moment of feedback or reflection. A lot of times is lost if there's no larger dialogue about it.
So all three of you have really talked about the importance of sitting in community and having conversation and the role that activism can play when you're dialoguing with each other. And so let's talk a little bit about that, and let's start with Halim. And so when you think about your work, and I'm captivated, I have to stop myself from looking at a piece of art behind me, because as I peek behind, I see something new every time. So talk about how you've used your artwork to activate people, or to start with dialogue. How has that served you on your path?
For me, I'm huge on accuracy, brevity, and clarity. Those are the ABCs of litigation as a jailhouse lawyer. That's how I was able to give back my life sentences through filing motions and petitions to the court, the city council, the mayor, and thus forth. So, and I'm big on meeting the people where they at. So, the majority of people who share my lived experience, they are not privy to the fine art world. And this fine art world was made aware to me by this new genre of luxury rap. Jay-Z and Diddy and, the rappers who are more established economically and can afford the social capital, the friendships and networks to gain access to this beautiful lifestyle. It's a very beautiful lifestyle. The fine art world has been very kind to me. A lot of things like race and class that other artists who look like me and have my lived experience have never probably received the reception that I've been able to receive. And I don't take that lightly, but what I understand is that the young lady right here, I don't know your name. What's your name right here? Lizzie. So Lizzie may not be a member of the Museum of Fine Art Houston or the Medill Collection, but if not her, then her peers, they love sneakers and they love streetwear. So I just don't stop with the fine art because I believe in the sneaker culture. I started selling. I took my pre-SATs when I was 11. I was taking classes at Howard University when I was 11. Right? And then I started selling dope when I was 12. Right? Because it was like, that reaction wasn't waiting for me in the hood. Right? That wasn't celebrated. What was celebrated was the sneakers that you wore, the cars that you drove, and the clothes that you wear. And me not having a strong sense of love for myself, I strangled and suffocated the nerd, Halim, and I became this gangster named Face. And so now I understand it's a beauty in experiencing both, because a lot of people are afraid of the youth, or really have never been dirty before. so it's a clean to like really like to meet the youth where they at. So for me, I stand in a unique position to where as though I've experienced drug dealing, robbing, killing, prison, fine art, wealth, prestige. I just been in a castle 3 days ago. And then I just saw my grandmother die in the hood last night. Right? So it's like going from being in a castle in Paris on 1,000 acres and then going back into the hood and just seeing my grandmother laid out on the floor last night. So, but having that power to be able to create these cultural assets, these paintings for the affluent, 1%, most of you can afford it, but also being able to create these dope sneakers and hoodies that the kids in the hood want. It's wearable art. And I'm introducing them, so when they see me with this, I'm introducing them to Picasso in a new way. And when I introduce them to Picasso, I'm introducing them to that painting right there, the portrait of an African mask that informed Pablo Picasso's Cubism, because he took his Cubism from us, the African artisans. So when people ask me, when did I start painting, I can say in 2020, but the possibility is that I could have came from the visual artists who put their work inside of the pyramids, who created the African masks and artifacts that's been looted, that are exhibited in museums today and are nameless. You'll never see their names on the tag, but Picasso gets to put his name on his work, which comes from them. So I stand in a unique position as an artist to be this like medium between the elite and the streets. And I just meet people where they at. So the elite, I can't meet them with sneakers, but I can meet them with paintings. So it's just like doing the work and meeting people where they at.
It's powerful. Let me just honor our ancestor. We honor your grandmother. Brandon, what's the role for dialogue and giving the 1%ers an opportunity to sit in space? I will tell you, in dialoguing with Nicole, she said something powerful to me. She probably doesn't know I remember. But I remember being in the Louvre and making sure that I looked like I should be there. I remember being in the art museum downtown and telling my husband to tighten up his shirt, tuck it in a little more. And Nicole said to me that she moved this studio to expand the proximity and to create an equitable space for people to come into so that it wouldn't be as stuffy. So I wouldn't have to tell my husband to tuck his shirt in before we go in the art museum. And that spoke to me in such a way that I thought that if we really approached our work, all of our work, from like, how do we build proximity? How do we think about that in a moment of who does not have access to what we have? How do we build proximity? And so some of that is the role of the criticism, as you were speaking about in the dialogue. And so how are you and how is Glasstire and the work, how are you all building proximity?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're very conscious of is that a lot of people are intimidated by art or art spaces, not just because they feel like they may not fit in because they're not the right socioeconomic class or race, but just because they feel like they don't understand what's going on in the art. They don't know how to look at art, or they feel like they don't know how to look at art. I'm a big advocate of going back to how the art just impacts you as a person, that you don't need to have a history of art in order to look at or appreciate art. You don't have to have this robust knowledge or background in order to look at and engage with and appreciate what's on the wall or on the floor in front of you. And that's how we approach, I would say, 95% of the work that we publish on Glasstire. Whenever I write, I kind of have an audience in mind, and we talk to new writers about this, and we keep this in mind whenever we're editing writing, of who that audience is. And for me, it's always my mother, who does not come from an art background, didn't study art history, hadn't really been to art museums until I started to do this job that I do. And whenever I write or whenever I read anything on the site, I try to think about, would she understand what's going on in this article? What would she get out of it? Or in what way would she be able to engage with this writing? Because that also affects how she's able to engage with the art that's being written about. And I think really successful writing, just like really successful art, or people who have like multidisciplinary artistic practices, like how you just mentioned, it has levels of engagement. I think anyone can look at a painting, anyone can read a piece of writing, a piece of criticism, an essay, and get something out of it, or should be able to get something out of it. I think there's a trick to being able to make that piece of art or being able to write that essay where also the people who know a lot of history or the people who have that education are able to get something even more out of it. There's kind of this strata of being able to access and be accessible to everyone, while at the same time also being able to entertain and communicate with people who may have more knowledge. And that's where our writing tries to really fit in, because there are folks who read Glasstire who have master's degrees in art histories, or who run galleries, or who are curators at museums, and we want them to be entertained and to get a lot out of our writing and a lot out of our website. But at the same time, I want my mom to be able to look at it and not be completely lost by references to Foucault or Diderot, I want her to be able to figure out what's going on in these articles, or not even figure out, that's too rough of a word. I want her to just read and understand what's going on.
You want to meet her where she is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tammie, you talked to us briefly about Darius. And I know that story stands at the intersection of activism and art. Tell us about Darius and the intersection that his story stands at.
Well, the intersection was art imitating life. I had a classroom assignment for Alf to put myself in another person's place. I had written an op-ed in the Houston Chronicle about the school-to-prison pipeline. And a reader contacted me, thought I was a journalist, and wanted me to go and evaluate his program in prison, Skills for Life, that's similar to Toastmasters. And I agreed. I thought that would be an excellent way for me to meet my obligation for my classroom assignment. So, I agreed to do so. But in all of that, I didn't know exactly what I was agreeing to. It was a divine appointment from God for me to go into the prison to help Darius Elam. When I went in all ready. My daughter was concerned about my escort, who was a fellow inmate, and that was my safety net. And everyone was kind of saying, "Are you crazy?" And my friend Dora here was like, "That's a maximum security you're going into." And before I could get in, the tower guard yelled out to me, "Stop!" Like, what did I do wrong? You got on a scarf. They will choke you with that. So immediately that sent a message to me that I wasn't in the stomping ground that I was accustomed to. Because I was there to literally really complete my assignment that I thought was my assignment. Went into this prison, and after I was requested to evaluate the program, and when I evaluated the program, after everyone had spoken, then one of Darius' associates who was in the middle of the line said, "Miss Campbell, you see that man at the back of the line? He's innocent. He doesn't belong here." So when Darius came up to me, Darius Elam, and I said, "I heard you're innocent. Now you can just imagine an inmate saying another inmate is innocent. Now that's the biggest recommendation you can get, because they don't be lobbying for each other like that." And so when I said to him, "Your associate said you're innocent," and he almost broke down in tears and said, "I am. Whatever you can do, I would greatly appreciate it." So that is how I came to helping Darius Elam. And from there, it's been 3 years of fighting with criminals on the outside. When you get into the system and trying to fight for post-conviction justice, once you get into the system, it's very difficult to get out. Darius, like Halim, have been writing motions, and even though he has an attorney, working and fighting to get out, but no one would listen. When we took on this case, literally nobody knew about Darius' case. Darius has no criminal background before then, a TSU student, a married, dedicated man, a productive citizen who was convicted of aggravated robbery. Initially it was aggravated murder, but they couldn't make that stick. So aggravated murder for life. He had served 40 years and has not got any kind of justice whatsoever. We requested HPD to do a post-conviction investigation, and they wanted to prove to me that they had the right man 40 years ago. They did the post-conviction investigation and called their informant, and the informant told them, "I don't want to lie anymore. This man is innocent. I never heard him admit that he had killed someone." And with that set a clear signal that this man was innocent for me. Now, HPD never contacted me. The informant called me because he wanted to buy protection for himself, and informed me that he had told HPD that the man never testified. I mean, the man never told him that he had committed this crime. Well, he had recanted to HPD, and he recanted to me. And that was the way we were able to get the December the 7th hearing. By the time we got the December 7th hearing, the informant had gotten afraid and said that he didn't remember talking to me or to HPD. And with that, where we are now, the informant perjured himself on the stand. Nothing was done by the special prosecutor or the judge to correct this situation, knowing that this informant had recanted his statement from the evidence that during the hearing that was unclear. Unfortunately, we tried to get the special prosecutor for Brazos County and Harris County to offer the informant a deal, immunity, to come forth with the truth. They refused to do it. And now we're at the point where we are trying to get the DNA, which excluded him initially back in 2009. But back then the labs weren't as advanced as they are now. We're trying to get that testing redone. So that's where we are. We're still in the middle of the fight, Nicole.
Okay. And what I hear is advocacy. What I hear you saying is there's work to be done on public advocacy and what we can do to support you. And Halim kind of spoke about that a little bit. He had to advocate for himself. I'm going to leave you all, but I'm not going far. I'm just opening it up to see if there's any opportunity for questions or dialogue with the panelists and the audience. Is there anything in the discussion that you all would like to? I'm going to ask that you pass the mic down the line.
You having your Oprah moment? Are you having your Oprah moment?
I'm having my Oprah moment.
Halim, I'd like to address this question to you. You talked about being literate and soaring as a student and not really having the tools to nurture that superpower that you had. So you went to prison with that superpower intact, and you read the Wall Street Journal, and literacy led the way for you. And then after prison, I'm pretty sure it was also a superpower to help you move forward. My question is, in prison, what did you observe among other inmates back to the school to prison pipeline in terms of the importance of literacy to secure a path to freedom? And why is that so crucial from what you've observed and experienced for our youth in our city of Houston? Houston ISD is about to be taken over. No school district that's been taken over has succeeded in changing the trajectory, and this is a high stakes moment for our city and our youth. So I would love for us to be able to learn from you and what you've observed from the inside and now on the outside.
Thank you for your question. First and foremost, hip hop is a sibling, and I grew up to Ghetto Boys. I grew up to Scarface, grew up to Bushwick Bill and Willie D, Big Mike, Fifth Ward Boys, using words to educate the world about what was going on in Houston through rap music. And for me, what I learned in prison very early on was that most youth, because I was a child in an adult institution, and back then they didn't even give us access to a GED program. So the first time that we rided on the tier where they held us at was just to get to the law library and to get outside. So they were supposed to let us go outside for 5 days a week to get air 1 hour a day, and we were supposed to go to the law library 1 day a week. So we ride it and we burned the tier down, and some of us almost died from the smoke or whatever. And they allowed us to go outside, but what I noticed when it was time to go to the law library, I was kind of like the only one that wanted to go. And what had happened as the years went past, what I've learned is that, and I learned this in now Governor Westmore's book. He wasn't the governor, the other Westmore. But state governors and legislators can predict the number of prison beds that they would need to fill by third grade reading comprehension scores. So I used to always wonder why in the criminal legal system, they would always identify me as an agitator and a manipulator, and like if the people on the tier did something, they would punish me, right? And wouldn't punish them. And what I realized, even in my case, I wasn't charged with being a shooter. They said I was with someone as if I orchestrated it. So what I realized is that having most youth can't really read and write like that. And I think they can have the ability, but it's just not nurtured. And even if they do have the ability, like myself, we don't get that hoorah, right? So we dumb it down just to be celebrated, within our community. So for me, it's like I learned that, but then I also learned like getting those 2 life sentences was a blessing, because like I hit the bottom of the bottomless pit, and like everybody left me, family, friends, everybody, and the only person I had was my mother. And it was a blessing that my mother worked at the Library of Congress. So once I hit that bottom and realized like I had spent my life to impress people who really wasn't worthy of impressing, and I said, I don't really have anything to lose. I got the rest of my life to fight to get out. I'm gonna commit my life to not only fighting to get out, but it put me in a position by so many people that couldn't advocate for themselves. I had to like fight their cases for them, and not just their criminal cases, but I had to fight the administration to preserve our human rights, because everything, even in prison, is based upon law and policy, but the staff, they don't adhere to the policy. So now I'm on the front line filing these administrative remedies and these civil injunctions to the court just to preserve like our religious freedoms and things of that nature. So what it did for me is I learned how we have to, starting with me, change the culture, because African American women have the highest college rate of any group of people in America. White, black, yellow, whatever you want to categorize people as. So we don't have a problem in the community. We have a problem with boys in the community. And I always was the smartest kid in the class, but I was encouraged to dumb it down. And that's what I learned. It's like so many boys enter prison either dumbing it down or just never having that skill set nurtured within the home and the community. And when they go in there, and you give a child a life sentence, and you feed them this narrative that when they get out, how hard it's going to be, and they believe in that narrative, then they just like they start to cannibalize their humanity. They start to even destroy their own humanity and start to have these abnormal behaviors in prison. And so if they do get the opportunity to get out, they come right back in, because they're so abnormal. Their abnormal has become so normal that they just become a product of this abnormal trajectory. So for me, the power that I learned is that through literature, through reading, not just reading, but writing. Like I didn't wait for a publishing company to publish me. I started my own publishing company, right? That's what I learned from the streets, how to hustle. So I started my own publishing company. I was like, if I could sell crack, I could sell books. So I published my own books because I realized that when I went to prison in 1997, we didn't have the internet. And then I started to learn about this .com thing, that when people was doing this Google search on my name, that the only narrative was his story, the government story, which wasn't true. So I said, well, people need to know my side of the story, because when we coming up, you taught me don't snitch. So I said, I'm not going to snitch on my case, but I'm going to tell my side of the story, what happened in my life, what happened with my case, and what I want in my future. That's the power of writing too, and art.
Yes.
Like you can write, I literally wrote my future. I'm in here right now, but if you read my book, Mind Over Matter, I wrote that book in 2009. So I just was asked to speak at the Milken Institute. Michael Milken is probably the richest ex-offender in the world history. Right? The movie Wall Street, Gordon Gekko is about Michael Milken. Michael Milken. I read about Michael Milken in prison and knew I'm going to meet that guy one day. And I wrote about it in a book. And now he asked me to come speak at his conference about that book. So So that is the power of alchemy. What I realized in prison is that we need to create as men a culture in a community that celebrates the arts and intelligence and being intellectual and not just having the sneakers and things. It's good to have that stuff too, but the power of being able to create your own nerve and write your own future, right, is a powerful thing. And that's why in the history of America, we were always considered dangerous if we can read and write.
I just bought your book.
We have another question back here, but I don't want to leave that of celebrating intelligence, uplifting intelligence, highlighting the importance of education and the role we can play in doing those things for young boys in our community. And maybe it's not then a superpower, right? And it's an investment. So.
Hello. I want to first issue my condolences for the loss of your brother and for your courage to be here and for you choosing to turn your trauma into your superpower, reframing the story of trauma to be the thing that is the source of your strength. That's huge in terms of value and reflects the power you have and we have to write our own stories. The question I have for you is in relationship to your bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I find myself a bridge between 250 years of Western science and 5,000 years of Eastern wisdom in my practice of teaching Qigong and Tai Chi. And as a bridge, as an artist between the haves and the street that would never come in contact with one another, speak to me about your thought process and the way you approach that opportunity.
For me, you have a painting behind me. So this painting behind me is an autobiographical piece about a battalion of African American women who the 6,888 Central Postal Directory Battalion. And these were a battalion of African American women during World War II who would deliver mail behind enemy lines in France. It took reading to learn about time investment, to put that information into my mind, and to create this body of work of how the Tuskegee Airmen were fighting against the Nazis with the Allies, and these brave women were in the midst of this to give these men the mail, no morale, but, leaving behind Jim Crow, right? That monster of Jim Crow, and knowing that they were returning from fighting the Nazis to go back to Jim Crow. So the connection point now, you look at the painting behind you this way. So when I did this painting right here, I had no history of the Menil collection. I did 3 paintings on the floor right here, and I asked Brad and Nicole about other art institutions outside of the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, because I did a piece on them right there. But what I learned about this piece, which is divinely across from this piece, is that the Menil collection was started by a woman from France who went to the Museum of Fine Art Houston to be a part of that community, but because she was a foreigner, they didn't want to accept her. So then she went and bought her own land and started her own thing, which I believe is far better than the Museum of Fine Art Houston. Just when you step on the space, it's like an aura around that property. So you have these black women delivering mail in France as the Tuskegee Airmen are fighting the Nazis. But then you have this woman who comes from France who wants to be a part of the art community and it's not accepted because of this man-made geographical identification that makes her a foreigner, right? And then she creates this beauty out of this tragedy of being denied community. So, and we didn't plan this, right? I wasn't aware of this until now, as I was sitting here, you know. And so this is like the beauty of art, when you can have that type of drive to learn and to listen and to be open. I think so many people are so afraid to just listen to people that they disagree with. I think that's the only way that we can grow, if we can be open to that everyone in the world does not share our perspective, right? And that we can disagree with kindness. And through listening to someone who doesn't share our lived experience and doesn't share our core values, even though we may not be aligned, but we can exchange information where we both can grow. And maybe down the line we can align through shared core values. But I think that's like the beauty in art, that this is created intentionally, and this is created just channeling, but they're divinely just fighting with each other or dancing with each other. One is black and white and one is colorful, but it's both connected to France and women, you know, and one woman will be socially constructed as white, the other group of women is black, but they both contribute to the human family.
And both denied belonging.
And my grandmother, she's not lost. She's here.
Totally.
So she's definitely not lost because, you know, my grandmother was an activist, you know, and like, you know, I did a lecture at Howard University last month and she came to see me, and that was the last time I saw her, you know, so her example is just, it's not lost, and we don't lose our ancestors because people, I was just in person and asked me like, how do I feel when people say that I'm copying Basquiat? I'm like, you can't, for one, you can't copy Basquiat. It's impossible. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that he's my ancestor, and he has influenced me, and I don't run away from the influence, but I have my own unique visual language. It's just deeply influenced by him. But he is my ancestor, and it's just like, if you're not going to criticize Pablo Picasso for the African mass influence, why would you criticize me about Jean-Michel Basquiat, who, if it wasn't for us seeing that someone like us could, he just auctioned a painting for $60 million. If we didn't see that we could have that type of potential in the art space, many of us would never try. We just would be rappers and ball players. So now we can paint.
Tammie, can you contribute to the question on your work and the intersection of what was just posed, of bringing two worlds together? Tell us about your work, because you talked about how you went in with one intention and came out with a very different light.
Thank you, Nicole. First, I want to say that, you know, art is in many forms, as Halim has said, along with Brandon. But art speaks to you. And if we cultivate young people at a young age to look, to think about what they're seeing, to talk about it, encourage them to have a conversation about what they're seeing, about even what they're watching on TV. See, they're all forms of art. What did you read about? How did it impact you? How did it influence your thought pattern? We want to, at the Honey Brown Hope Foundation, develop critical thinkers. You develop critical thinkers through art. And if we get a real concept of the influence of art and how we can help young people engage and be productive citizens through the arts, we would really conquer the biggest problem that we're having now, and that is the school to prison pipeline. That is illiteracy. Now, when you're talking about the school to prison pipeline, you're talking about, as Halim said, at the 3rd grade level. What do they do at the 3rd grade level in the educational system? What he said was they're writing you off. They are using that metric to determine that you're going to need not a mansion, but a prison cell. So they building prison cells based on those who can't read. They're not helping. But when we identify a problem, Nicole, what is our responsibility as an individual? We have a responsibility. We all have the capacity to be artists, to shape others and to the best person that they can be. So that's what we try to do at the Honey Brown Hope Foundation. And everything that we do, once we identify a problem, we act on the problem. And that is what activism is all about, and each of us can be activism, and each of us can contribute. When I think about the late Harry Belafonte, and what he gave up as an entertainer, to help move forward the civil rights movement, to help Dr. Martin Luther King pay his bills, pay for others to get out of jail. What can you do? Like our president, former President John F. Kennedy said, ask not what you can do for your country, but what you ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Those are the questions that we need to, that is the question that we need to pose to ourselves, because all of us have a responsibility and all of us can bring about a change.
And so what I'm hearing is the difference between a moment and a movement. And I want to open this back up to the audience. And my grandfather would say, the difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice, Nicole.
Ooh. Yes.
Grandma knew.
And so we've heard about the sacrifice that Halim had to pay. He talked about the role, even within his incarceration journey, and the sacrifice they had to pay, being called an agitator, right? When they knew he could write about the rights that were being evaded, right? What is the difference now that we've learned a little bit this evening? What is the difference between the moment we have here today and the movement that we feel in our spirit deeply?
Hello, my name is Campbell. If you can't tell, I look just like my mom. Just like her. Just like her. But Halim, everything you have been saying today speaks so powerfully to a growth mindset. And when you are met with new information, with new experiences, that you are willing to pivot, that you make the decision that I'm going to get unstuck, I'm going to take the steps to get unstuck, regardless of whether or not it seems like the system is against me, regardless of whether or not it takes a decision to get unstuck. It takes a decision to grow beyond what you may have even seen. And I think everything in your art says that. Everything that you've been saying here says that. And I think cognitive dissonance is something that America is an epidemic. Even when people are met with the truth, they choose not to allow the truth to move them to pivot. They choose to not allow empathy or love to move them to pivot. So much of what you, I use my urban vernacular, spit here today, is a lesson for us to evaluate our lives, to get unstuck, to move beyond what we have thought was true, to learn and to unlearn, and to use our gifts to keep the movement moving, so it doesn't just become a moment.
Yes, and baby girl, I want to add, to use your gift to help others. It's
Yeah.
not just about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The difference between a moment and a movement is our why. And what I heard today is that the stakes are extremely high.
Yes.
So if we think about the country with the highest incarceration rate in the world, it is the United States of America. If you think about the population density of China and India, we have more people incarcerated, but we claim we're a democracy and believe in freedom. So there's dissonance there. We know that in our state, 48% of inmates are dyslexic, and they did not have the privilege of receiving therapy. We know that 85% of adjudicated youth are functionally illiterate, and they look like the black and brown children who are our future in this city. And so we are at a tipping point. With AI on the horizon, the divide between the haves and the have-nots is going to get bigger. So it's all hands on deck. I would say everybody, regardless of zip code or the suit you were sent here in, needs to be a part of this movement. And I heard it starts with love. Love is an action word. So those who are advocating for change are loving their neighbor as they love themselves. That's the bottom line.
Can you speak to your piece of agape in the back?
I just had a conversation with an art collector in Paris, and she was Polish, but she had informed me, because I did a live painting and the word agape was in the piece, and she was like, "It's interesting that you put it. Why did you put that in there?" I was like, "Well, agape means, the Greek had 3 words for love: eros, erotic, feel, more camaraderie, brotherly love, and then agape is the divine unconditional love." And she was like, her experience with the word as growing up in like the Catholic Church is agape was is related to the last meal that Jesus had before his death. And so for me, it made it like a double entendre. Unintentionally, right? Because I believe that in order to commit to unconditional love, like something has to die inside of you, right? And I think the thing that has to die is this cultural, social constructions and stratifications, identifications, and quantifications that we have manufactured. It is a work of art. Race is a work of art. Beautifully destructive. It's not real. And I think that people forget that these nation states that we call like America or Egypt or France and Italy, these were just like places at one time. And even the people today who can, who have the privilege to fit under the social construction of white. When you study the history of white, it was once just an Anglo-Saxon thing. It didn't, if you were Polish or Jewish or German or Catholic, you couldn't fit up underneath of that shield. And so I just feel like, agape, to me, it means unconditional love from my studies. But understanding that, looking at it conceptually, the last meal of Christ, right? And our cultural understanding of the last meal from where we're from in America is the last meal that the person get on death row, right? And so it's like, I believe there's something, all of us have to go through the electric chair, right, to get open heart surgery to kill off hate and anger and vengeance in order to be able to like resurrect as Jesus did, right? To resurrect in love. because we're born pure, but then we're taught that we're white, and then we're black, and then we're this, and then we're that. And not only do we start to really like look at others in an unloving way, but a lot of us have not a dialogue, as you mentioned, but a soliloquy. We have internal conversations with self that are unloving about self that we see in the mirror every day. So it's damn near impossible for us to love anybody, not even with conditions. We didn't even get to unconditional love. We can't even love with conditions because we don't even love ourselves.
Yes. Most definitely.
I just want to share that for me, some years ago, back in '75, there was something for me that happened. And I went through a teaching about some priests and some lay people in my church. I got involved with the Latino community, very concerned and angry at what was happening to our people. And it was like I was just waking up, and sometimes you're just asleep, you know, and you don't really know, you don't really understand. So then I remember when they taught us based on the gospel about working with the community, and that there was a lesson from Exodus. When the Egyptians told the Israelites are getting too numerous, we have to do something to keep them in their place. Well, that was a moment for me that's never gone away, because it kept repeating itself, the story. And one of the things about anger is important when you use it right.
Yes.
When you fight against an injustice. But there's got to be a lot of love in that, and no hate. And that's one of the things that you talked about it, and it's got to happen to you in your heart. And there's got to be that goodness in you, because if not, you're just going to get into that little what's in it for me, which is what's in the world right now. Okay, but at the same time, though, that anger is important so that you can continue fighting against injustices. Tammie talked about the schools prison pipeline. That's happening right now.
Yes.
And not enough people are even looking at our schools.
Right.
What's happening in every district. Every district is an island.
Yes.
You just can't say, well, I'm going to take care of this district and the other ones are okay. No. Kids are suffering. And we're just standing by and not supporting people that are fighting. I'm going through that right now. I'm fighting for some kids, but what's happening to those kids is happening to other kids. And that's not right. So there's so much good work the Lord has for us to do. But the only way you can do it is when you step out of yourself and you serve the other.
A question to the panel, as we're at 8, but we want to honor what's happening in the room right now. Did you have something? Okay, just one minute. Anyone else to give you an opportunity? What has to die? In our work, in us, so that when we walk out of here tonight and we lay our heads on the bed and we wake up, if God honors that opportunity for us tomorrow, that we don't go back saying it's not our business. What has to die in us today? What's your perspective, Halim?
Lemons. It's just that simple for me. I just believe limitations, ceilings. I don't have any. And I think that as long as we have them, like impossibilities, then we believe in like miracles. I don't believe in miracles. I don't believe anything is impossible. And that gives me a perspective that makes me optimistic. And when tragedies occur, instead of it destroying me and my confidence in a better future, it just encourages me to continue to do the work. And I have no limitations to what I'm set out to do. So I think that's the most important thing for me as an individual. Can't speak for the collective, but for me it's just like limitations. I think that we begin like looking at it like it's too big. too much. It's been going on for too long, you know, and it carries over into the work. And I think that when we remove those limitations, as they say, let go and let God, then we can walk on water and split seas and, you know, go in the bellies of whales and the dens with lions and all type of stuff that people find to be impossible, and do some very incredible things.
I think this parallels with what you just said, but self-doubt. Dealing with a lot of writers and artists, myself being a person in the world, I feel like that's a thing that I've benefited the most the more I've let go of it. That, of course, isn't to say that self-awareness, it's good to replace self-doubt with self-awareness, because it allows you to be confident and to sometimes make missteps, and then the self-awareness allows you to pull back, learn from those, and become a better person, and be able to serve other people better.
Well, Nicole, I think the selfishness in us has to die. When we think about the suffering of others, we have to think about it in a way that is impacting us deeply, where it is impacting us as if it is a loved one, that we will get up in spite of being afraid, in spite of being concerned about our own safety, that we will address the issue as though it was a loved one, or if we were fighting for ourselves. So that selfishness in us, to turn our head, to say that's their problem. That's not impacting me. I don't know anybody that's going through that. If you see the suffering, it is your responsibility to address it and try to find a solution to make it better for that person, for the people who are suffering, to be a true servant first of God, and then you can be a person that loves yourself, because when you don't love yourself, you can't love others, as Halim said. So true love, true consideration, and let self die, selfishness die, is what we have to do.
Let's give a round of applause. There is so much more that we can continue this conversation after today. And my challenge to you is to find a way to do that.
Yes.
There are clearly experts in this room, not only these esteemed panelists, but others who are working in the work, working alongside the work, working adjacent to the work, advocating for the work, highlighting and supporting the work, uplifting the work. There is a role for all of us to play. And many times we think we have to be in the work to do something about it. And sometimes what we need is just someone to uplift it, to tell the perspective from someone who doesn't look like the person. And so my challenge to you is to activate yourself and let something die inside to do that. And create an accountability partner. Walk around, enjoy this beautiful artwork that we all have the privilege of being in an arts gallery tonight to enjoy. Nicole, any last words for us?
really just want to thank everyone for coming. What a powerful, powerful evening of community. So thank you all for taking the time to be here. Thank you to our panelists and to you, Nicole, for moderating. And a huge thank you to ALF for being our partner in this evening. Please continue the conversation while you're here and make yourself